So I took counsel in my great heart, whether I should draw near, and pluck my sharp sword from my thigh, and stab him in the breast, where the midriff holds the liver, feeling for the place with my hand. But my second thought withheld me, for so should we too have perished even there with utter doom. For we should not have prevailed to roll away with our hands from the lofty door the heavy stone which he set there. Dawn. Now when early dawn shone forth, the rosy-fingered, again he kindled the fire, and milked his goodly flocks all orderly, and beneath each ewe set her lamb. Anon, when he had done all of his work busily, again he seized yet other 2 men, and made ready his midday meal. And after the meal, lightly he moved away from the great stone door, and drave his fat flocks forth from the cave. And afterwards he set it in place again, lid on a quiver. Then, with a loud whoop, the Cyclops turned his fat flocks toward the hills, but I was left devising evil in the deep of my heart, if in any wise I might avenge me. We are doing this iconic scene in slow motion. Sorry, folks who have told me you want slightly longer episodes. I get it. The page breaks for these have been done somewhat blindly. Well, I should say without necessarily intention. The only criteria being when I broke it up, I wasn't reading through it. I was just making sure that it didn't stop in the middle of a sentence, that there wasn't going to be a page with like a paragraph on it. I did try for a minimum word count, but some days are just going to be shorter than the others, and I apologize for that, but variety is the spice of life, baby. Some are long, some are short, so just relax and drink some port. I just came up with that. Actually, I hate port, so don't drink that if you don't like it. It's not very good. Okay, I think I've made the comparisons to the 7 Voyages of Sinbad. I think now is a time for my personal story. Even though we're not done with this Cyclops vignette yet. Vignette? Oh my god, what is wrong with me? I'd love to regale you with a one of these things that just, I guess it's not really a coincidence, it's not ironic, it's just like one of these peculiar things that happen in life. So early on in this show, I had told y'all about my English class in which I was kind of introduced to Greek mythology. I had that speech about Artemis. I wish I could point you to a specific episode, but it was pretty early on, I'd say in the first 3 books. And I'm guessing that this story took place during that time, during that period where we were studying Greek mythology for what felt like 1,000 years. And now I know why. I remember one day in class being shown a version of the Odyssey. Sometimes the way that, at least when I was in high school, they would show part of the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet from 1968 when we're studying Shakespeare. So we're shown some of the Odyssey. Now, I was not a good student. We've covered that. I don't think I was paying attention in class at all. Therefore, if I wasn't paying attention, I don't have that vivid of a memory surrounding this. So I can't say that we watched the entirety of the series. But what captured my attention, as you can imagine, a distractible young lad as I was the Cyclops sequence. And I think partly because I loved 1981 Clash of the Titans already, and so the series that we were shown had a really cool special effects sequence with Polyphemus. Interesting that we haven't been introduced to him by name, at least in this vignette. I mean, we were earlier in the story when we learned about why Poseidon is so pissed off, but the Cyclops in this sequence is shot from a couple different types of special effects. You got perspective going on, you've got colored lighting, and some mechanical character work props that were designed by Carlo Rambaldi, because the version we were watching was from 1968. Apparently everything they show in school when I was there came from 1968. Anyway, I just remember being enamored with this sequence, and it kind of lived rent-free in my head for a long time without me knowing where exactly it came from. Obviously I knew it was the Odyssey, but I never sought it out. And then later in life, I started going down my horror studies rabbit hole. And as I've mentioned on the show before, those rabbit holes take you to some weird places. So just kind of internationally road tripping through horror. And if you're getting into horror, you're going to end up in Italy at some point. It's just inevitable. You can't avoid it. But during this period of time, I was really developing my tastes, and I like to describe my horror tastes as like where trash meets art house, and a little maybe veering closer to art house than trash. So like my favorite horror film is Suspiria, but my favorite director is Mario Bava, and I developed a love for him because of his use of expressionistic colored lighting, his penchant for special effects. He was a technician of special effects from a long line of special effects technicians. His father was into special effects. Mario Bava was a cinematographer before he started directing films. And when he got into horror, he really applied so much of his knowledge for bringing an experience to the viewer that was different than almost anyone else was doing. His use of foreground and camera work to just really immerse a viewer in atmosphere. It's just, you want to just bite into each one of his frames. And so I really became enamored with his work through Blood and Black Lace and Black Sunday and Black Sabbath, and Planet of the Vampires, I think, was my first movie of his. And then, oddly, one of his last movies was very early for me, called Shock, or sometimes it's called Beyond the Door 2. Landon, you're getting a little too in the weeds here. Okay, got it. Let's get back on track. Because he became one of my favorite directors, I had to seek out everything he's done. And to this day, have seen almost everything, save for one or two of his really, really obscure westerns. But one thing that was hard to find, and one of the last things I found, was that he had directed 2 episodes of something called L'Odyssey, which is Italian for the Odyssey. I don't speak Italian, so I didn't realize that the title I was seeing was The Odyssey. But I finally got around to looking up whether or not this was viewable on any of the streaming services. It wasn't, so then I go to my backup, which is this available on YouTube? Which it was. Not in a great quality, mind you, but it's there. And so I started watching the miniseries on YouTube, and it's is it 6 or 8 part, I can't remember, miniseries. And Mario Bava directs the 3rd and 4th episodes, one of which is the Polyphemus episode. And it turns out that Cyclops Polyphemus sequence I saw all those years ago in high school that enamored my imagination even then would turn out to be directed by who would become my all-time favorite director. And I highly recommend anyone that is interested in the Odyssey or interested in special effects to look up this episode. You can even just search for 1968 Odyssey Cyclops sequence and just watch that by itself. And try to put yourself in the mindset of a youngster that might be enamored with special effects and fantasy and science fiction and you know, all that stuff, and tell me that it's not exciting. The other kind of interesting trivia to this is that Mario Bava often worked in special effects with Carlo Rambaldi, who designed Polyphemus for this miniseries, who would then go on to design creatures like E.T. for Steven Spielberg. So lots of clout in Italy, working particularly in the late 60s into the early 70s. Anyway, it made me cherish the memory of seeing that Cyclops sequence all the more when I was a youngster, now that I know that I like having what I feel like a deep connection to Mario Bava feels enriched by the fact that I was affected by his work even long before I knew who he was. All right, that's all I've got for today. Join me here tomorrow as we see what happens. We know what's going to happen with this Cyclops sequence. So until tomorrow, okay, goodbye. Odyssey is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. The show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Odyssey, written by Homer. Theme song by Neuroflow. You can support this show and other shows like it by going to patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.